confident woman steps into a corporate office, only to hear her colleagues mocking her hairstyle, labeling it unprofessional. What happens when the truth about her identity comes out? Will they confront their biases, or will the workplace culture stay the same? Stay tuned to find out, and don't forget to share where you're watching from in the comments below. The elevator doors slid open with a quiet chime, and Morgan Hayes stepped into the lobby of Jefferson Financial Group. The space buzzed with activity. Heels clicking against the polished floors, snippets of conversations about quarterly goals and market trends filling the air. Morgan adjusted her blazer, the soft fabric hugging her shoulders just right, and smoothed her hands down her sleek pencil skirt. Her long, intricately braided hair hung down her back, shining under the harsh fluorescent lights. She walked with confidence, her black pumps barely making a sound, but her presence turned heads nonetheless. A group of junior associates standing near the coffee machine gave her a quick glance, their eyes lingering just a little too long. Morgan caught snippets of their hushed conversation. "Do you think she's the new assistant they hired for marketing?" one whispered, their tone carrying a tinge of disdain. "Could be. But what's with the hair? Braids that long? Definitely not professional," another chimed in, stifling a laugh. Morgan felt the heat rise in her cheeks but kept her face neutral, her stride unbroken. They didn't know who she was. Yet. Let them speculate, she thought. They would learn soon enough. She reached the front desk, where a receptionist greeted her with a slightly guarded smile. "Good morning, can I help you?" "I'm Morgan Hayes, here to see Mr. Langston. I'm the new regional director," she said, her voice steady, carrying just enough authority to dispel doubt. The receptionist blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, of course. Welcome, Miss Hayes. Mr. Langston's office is just down that hall, last door on the right." "Thank you," Morgan replied, her lips curving into a polite smile. She could still feel the receptionist's eyes on her as she walked away, like she was mentally reshuffling whatever assumptions she'd made moments before. Morgan knocked twice before stepping into the office. Robert Langston, the vice president of operations, looked up from his desk with a broad grin. He was a portly man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and the kind of booming voice that commanded attention in any room. "Oh, Morgan, come in," he exclaimed, standing to greet her. "Welcome to the team. We're thrilled to have you on board." "Thank you, Mr. Langston," Morgan said, shaking his hand firmly. "Please, call me Robert," he insisted, motioning for her to sit. "I've already reviewed your portfolio, and I must say your track record is impressive. You've got exactly the kind of forward-thinking vision we need to shake things up around here." "I appreciate the opportunity to make an impact," Morgan replied, her tone professional yet warm. "I'm eager to get started." Robert leaned back in his chair, regarding her thoughtfully. "You'll have your hands full, no doubt. Some of our department leads are set in their ways, but I have no doubt you'll win them over." Morgan nodded, fully aware of the unspoken challenges she'd face as a young, black woman in a senior leadership role. She had climbed the corporate ladder before, and while her qualifications had always spoken for themselves, she knew how often people let bias cloud their judgment. This wasn't her first rodeo. As they wrapped up their discussion, Robert handed her a stack of documents. "Your office is ready, and your team is eager to meet you. I've scheduled a meeting with the department heads at 10 a.m. so you can introduce yourself." "Perfect," Morgan said, rising from her seat. "I'll see you then." The meeting room was a sleek, glass-walled space with a long table and ergonomic chairs. Morgan arrived 10 minutes early, setting up her laptop and arranging her notes. The door was slightly ajar and she could hear voices filtering in from the hallway. The same voices from earlier. "Did you see the new girl walking around, the one with the braids?" one of them said, his voice carrying the same mocking tone. "And what's her deal? This is a corporate office, not a hair salon," another responded, chuckling. Morgan's fingers tightened around her pen. She took a deep breath, centering herself. These moments used to sting, but now they only fueled her resolve. She reminded herself of the countless young professionals who had written to her on LinkedIn, inspired by her success, her authenticity, and yes, her unapologetically braided hair. The voices grew louder as the group entered the meeting room, still mid-conversation. They stopped abruptly when they saw her standing at the head of the table. "Oh," one of them muttered, clearly taken aback. A woman with a sharp bob and a crisp white blouse forced a smile. "You must be Morgan, the, assistant for this meeting?" Morgan arched an eyebrow but kept her composure. "Actually, I'm Morgan Hayes, your new regional director. It's a pleasure to meet all of you." The silence was deafening. The man who had mocked her earlier coughed, avoiding eye contact, while the woman's smile froze in place, faltering at the edges. "Well, it's great to meet you," the woman finally said, her voice an octave higher. "I'm Claire Matthews, head of marketing." Morgan extended a hand. "Nice to meet you, Claire. I look forward to working together." The rest of the department heads introduced themselves with varying degrees of awkwardness. Morgan could see the wheels turning in their heads as they reassessed her, their earlier assumptions crumbling. Once everyone was seated, Morgan began the meeting. Her voice was steady, her confidence unwavering. "Before we dive into strategies and objectives, I want to share a bit about myself and what I bring to this role. I believe in fostering a culture of innovation and inclusivity. For us to succeed, every voice needs to be heard and every perspective needs to be valued." She glanced around the room, making deliberate eye contact. That includes challenging outdated notions of what professionalism looks like. Diversity isn't just a buzzword, it's a strength. And if we're going to thrive, we need to embrace that. Some of the department heads nodded, their expressions shifting from guarded to thoughtful. Morgan knew she had planted the seed. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but this was a start. As the meeting wrapped up, Robert Langston stopped by, clapping Morgan on the shoulder. "Fantastic job, Morgan. I can already tell you're exactly what this team needed." Morgan smiled, but her mind was already racing ahead. She didn't just want to shake things up. She wanted to set a precedent, one where no one felt they had to dim their light or hide their identity to fit in. She walked back to her office, her braided hair swinging behind her like a banner of defiance and pride. Change was in the air, and she was ready to lead the charge. Morgan Hayes settled into her new office, which was sleek and modern with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bustling city below. The room, while impressive, still bore the faint imprint of its previous occupant. Old plaques hung slightly crooked, and the desk bore faint ring marks from someone's coffee mug. Morgan didn't mind. It reminded her of how she had always made spaces her own, transforming them into something reflective of her vision. She powered on her laptop and began familiarizing herself with the department's past reports. Each page reaffirmed what she suspected. While Jefferson Financial Group had strong financials, its culture lagged behind the innovation needed to sustain growth. The data was all there. Stagnating team morale, high turnover rates, and customer satisfaction scores slowly trending downward. What the company needed wasn't just new strategies, it needed a new perspective. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Claire Matthews, the head of marketing, who had worn that frozen smile during the meeting earlier. "Mrs. Hayes, Morgan, do you have a moment?" Claire asked, stepping in without waiting for an answer. Morgan closed her laptop and gestured toward the chair opposite her. "Of course. Please, have a seat." Claire sat, smoothing her skirt nervously. "I just wanted to say, congratulations on the role. It's not every day we get someone with such an interesting background." Morgan raised an eyebrow, her face neutral. "Interesting?" Claire hesitated, clearly trying to frame her thoughts. "You know, someone who's, well, you bring a fresh perspective, and your style is bold." Morgan clasped her hands together on the desk, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. "Claire, if there's something specific you'd like to say, I encourage you to say it." Claire flushed. No, it's just, well, the team is adjusting, that's all." "Adjusting," Morgan repeated slowly. "Claire, I appreciate your candor. Change isn't always easy, but it's necessary. If there are any concerns, I'd rather address them head-on than let them linger." Claire's discomfort was palpable, but she nodded quickly. Of course. I'll be sure to bring any concerns to your attention. Morgan smiled politely. Good. Because I'm here to support this team, Claire. That's my job. But I also expect the team to reciprocate that support. Claire left shortly after, and Morgan leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. She had encountered people like Claire before, those who cloaked their biases in polite language, as if softening the blow made it any less harmful. But Morgan wasn't here to focus on their discomfort. She had bigger goals. Later that afternoon, Morgan joined a team meeting in the marketing department. It was supposed to be a routine discussion of campaign performance, but as Morgan listened, she noticed a pattern. The junior staff members, many of whom were women or people of color, seemed hesitant to speak up. When they did, their ideas were often dismissed or co-opted by their supervisors. At one point, a young man named Damien, a marketing associate who appeared to be in his late 20s, pitched an idea for a social media campaign targeting younger demographics. Before he could finish, one of the senior managers interrupted him. Social media isn't really where our audience is, the manager said dismissively. We should stick to what we know works. Damien hesitated, his enthusiasm dimming. I just thought, no need to overthink it, the manager cut him off, moving on to the next agenda item. Morgan's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. For now, she was observing, taking mental notes, and preparing for a moment when her voice could have the most impact. The opportunity came during the department head's strategy session later that week. Morgan had asked everyone to prepare presentations on their goals for the upcoming quarter. Claire went first, outlining a campaign targeting mid-level investors with a polished but unremarkable pitch. Morgan listened intently, asking questions that forced Claire to think deeper. What's the growth potential of this audience? How do we differentiate ourselves from competitors? Claire stumbled through her answers, clearly unprepared for the level of scrutiny. When it was Damien's turn to present, Morgan noticed how he avoided eye contact with his senior managers. His hands shook slightly as he clicked through his slides, detailing his vision for a digital-first approach that leveraged TikTok influencers and interactive online content. The senior manager, who had dismissed Damien earlier, rolled his eyes. We've been through this before. TikTok doesn't fit our brand image. It's a waste of resources. Morgan held up a hand, silencing him. Actually, I'd like to hear more, she said, her tone firm but encouraging. Damien, your proposal aligns with some of the trends I've been seeing in industry reports. Tell me, what's your projected ROI for this campaign? Damien blinked, surprised that someone was genuinely interested in his ideas. Well, based on our data, I estimate a 25% increase in engagement and a 15% rise in conversions within 6 months. Morgan nodded thoughtfully. That's significant. And your cost projections? Lower than traditional ad placements, Damien said, his confidence growing. Morgan smiled. Thank you, Damien. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need. She turned to the rest of the room. Let's be clear. The way we've been doing things isn't enough. The market is evolving, and so must we. If we dismiss new ideas out of hand, we stagnate, and stagnation is the fastest path to failure. Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The senior manager shifted uncomfortably in his seat but said nothing. As the days went on, Morgan continued to challenge the status quo. She hosted open forums where employees could share their concerns anonymously, uncovering a treasure trove of insights about the company's blind spots. She introduced diversity training, not as a one-off box-ticking exercise, but as an ongoing dialogue about inclusivity and equity. Some resisted, of course. There were whispers in the break room about how Morgan was pushing too hard or trying to change too much too fast. But others, especially those who had felt marginalized, began to see her as an ally and a leader worth following. One morning, as Morgan walked into the office, she noticed Damien waiting by her door. "You have a minute, Ms. Hayes?" he asked nervously. "Oh, always," Morgan replied, stepping aside to let him in. He sat down, clutching a folder. "I just wanted to thank you for giving me a chance." Morgan tilted her head. "Damien, you earned that chance. All I did was listen." He nodded, but his eyes were filled with gratitude. "Still, it means a lot. No one's ever done that before." Morgan smiled. "Well, get used to it. Because this isn't a one-time thing. You've got potential, Damien. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." The turning point came during a quarterly company waste meeting, where Morgan was scheduled to present her vision for the future of Jefferson Financial Group. The room was packed, with employees from all departments filling the chairs and spilling into the aisles. The same group of junior associates who had mocked her on her first day sat near the back, their faces sheepish as they realized the scale of her authority. Morgan stood at the podium, her braided hair gleaming under the stage lights. She began by sharing her journey, how she had started as an intern in a male-dominated field, how she had faced countless obstacles but had never let them define her. "Success," she said, her voice steady, "isn't about conforming to outdated notions of what a leader looks like. It's about authenticity, resilience, and the courage to challenge the status quo." The room erupted in applause, and Morgan allowed herself a small smile. Change was happening, slowly but surely. Morgan Hayes sat at her desk, sunlight streaming through the expansive windows, warming the room and casting soft golden light across her paperwork. The air in the office felt lighter, as though the weight of entrenched biases had started to lift, even if just slightly. A large calendar on the wall highlighted key company milestones, but one particular date was circled in red. Her first quarterly review as regional director. It was tomorrow, and she was ready. The past months had been a whirlwind. Morgan had spent countless late nights revising policies, meeting with department heads, and spearheading initiatives to foster inclusivity and innovation. Change wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't fast, but it was happening. One afternoon, as Morgan was grabbing coffee in the break room, she overheard a familiar voice behind her. It was Claire Matthews, the marketing director, speaking in hushed tones to another manager. "I didn't think she'd last," Claire admitted, her voice tinged with guilt. "But honestly, she's turned this place around. That diversity training alone shifted how I approach my team, and Damien, he's thriving because of her support." The other manager chuckled. "Yeah. She's something else. I'll admit I judged her too quickly at first. But I was wrong. She's exactly what we needed." Morgan pretended not to hear, a small, private smile tugging at her lips as she walked away. These were the victories that mattered most, changing minds and inspiring others to be better. The tangible results would come, but the shift in culture was her true prize. The most significant transformation had been among the junior staff, who now felt emboldened to share their ideas. Employees who once stayed silent in meetings now spoke up with confidence, knowing their input would be valued. Even Claire, once dismissive of innovative approaches, had started championing bold campaigns, crediting her team for their creativity. At one point, Morgan had been called into a meeting with Robert Langston, the VP of Operations. He leaned back in his chair, smiling broadly as he gestured to a report on his desk. "Do you see this, Morgan?" he said, tapping the document. "Customer satisfaction is up 22%. Employee retention? The highest it's been in 5 years. And revenue? We're on track to beat projections for the first time in a—" "That's great news," Morgan replied, though she wasn't surprised. She had seen the changes taking root, one small victory at a time. Robert leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I'll be honest with you. When we hired you, I knew you were qualified, but I wasn't sure how your approach would fit here. You've proved me and a lot of people wrong. Thank you for leading the charge." Morgan nodded, appreciating his candor. "It's not just me, Robert. The team is stepping up. They just needed the right environment to thrive." A week later, as Morgan was reviewing a proposal in her office, there was a knock at the door. She looked up to see the trio of junior associates who had mocked her on her first day. They shifted nervously, one of them clutching a small gift bag. Mrs. the tallest one began, his voice hesitant. We wanted to apologize." Morgan leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "Apologize for what?" she asked, though she already knew. The young man glanced at his colleagues, then back at her. "For what we said on your first day, about your hair, about you." Morgan watched them for a moment, letting the weight of their words settle. Then she gestured for them to sit. "Why are you apologizing now?" she asked, her tone calm but direct. One of the women spoke up this time, her voice trembling slightly. "Because we were wrong. You've shown us what true leadership looks like, and I guess we've realized how unfair we were." The young man handed her the gift bag. Inside was a book about the history of black hair and its cultural significance. Morgan's throat tightened as she ran her fingers over the cover. "Thank you," she said softly. "Acknowledging your mistake is the first step. But real change means acting differently moving forward." "We understand," the young woman said, her voice resolute, "and we'll do better." The day of Morgan's quarterly review arrived, and the boardroom was packed with executives and department heads. Morgan stood at the front, her braided hair tied into an elegant updo, her tailored suit radiating confidence. A slideshow illuminated the screen behind her, displaying the progress made under her leadership. Morgan's voice was steady as she outlined the improvements. Higher customer engagement, increased revenue, and most importantly, a workplace culture survey that showed a 40% rise in employee satisfaction. "But this isn't just about numbers," Morgan said, turning to address the room. "It's about people. When employees feel seen, heard, and valued, they give their best. And when we embrace diverse perspectives, we don't just grow as individuals, we thrive as a company." The room erupted in applause as Morgan concluded her presentation. Even Claire, who had once doubted her, stood and clapped, her face beaming with admiration. After the meeting, Robert pulled Morgan aside. "You've set a high bar, Morgan. I can't wait to see what you accomplish next." Morgan smiled. "This is just the beginning." Later that evening, as the office emptied out, Morgan lingered in her chair, gazing out the window at the twinkling city lights. Her mind wandered to her younger self, the girl who was told she'd never succeed in a corporate world, that her braids weren't professional, that she didn't belong. She touched her hair, feeling the strength and history woven into each strand. Her braids were more than a style. They were a testament to her journey, her resilience, and her refusal to conform to anyone's expectations but her own. Her phone buzzed and she glanced at the screen. It was a message from Damien. "Thank you for everything. You've changed my life." Morgan smiled, a deep warmth filling her chest. The work was hard and the journey far from over, but moments like this made it all worthwhile. The following week, Morgan hosted an open forum for employees to share their ideas for the company's future. The turnout was overwhelming, with employees from all levels eager to contribute. It was a testament to the culture Morgan had worked so hard to build, a culture. As she wrapped up the session, Morgan looked out at the sea of faces, each one brimming with potential. "Remember," she said, her voice carrying across the room, "leadership isn't about power or titles. It's about lifting others up and creating space for everyone to shine." The room erupted in applause once more, and as Morgan stepped away from the podium, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She wasn't just building a career, she was leaving a legacy. Morgan's journey was far from over, but she knew one thing for certain: she belonged here, in this space, as her authentic self. And with every step forward, she would continue to pave the way for others to do the same.